Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. Do not forget that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan83. Additionally, you can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan. The Full Court Press is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And do not forget, you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Simply take your device and play the Full Court Press by Drew Duncan. Your college football weekend review may look a little mundane at first sight, but I look at a matchup tonight, for instance, between Washington State and Houston, and I love to do a little bit of contrast and comparison because obviously the Oklahoma Sooners have already played this very Houston Cougar football team. And what I'm going to be looking for in this football game is contrast and comparison. Because OU, with Jalen Hurts and company, regarded to be one of the top-tier teams in the country right now, played them their first week out and was very dominant for the most part, right? So Washington State, with their quarterback, Anthony Gordon and company, having a couple of games under their belt now, should actually be better than the Oklahoma Sooners when it comes to playing Houston, because now you're starting to get a little bit of rhythm, you're starting to get a little bit of timing, right? So you should actually be better. So predicated upon how they play this game could be a look at who Washington State really is. Another game that I'm going to be looking at is Ohio State and Indiana. Look, so far with Coach Ryan Day, Ohio State does not look like they have missed a beat. And this quarterback, Penix for Indiana, has been a little turnover prone already in the season, right? Only 2 games, already 2 interceptions. Whereas when we look at Fields' quarterback for Ohio State, no turnovers at all. But Indiana has been kind of one of those teams that's been growing and coming back up. And, you know, the Big Ten is getting a little bit tougher with some of these other teams like Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, right? They're kind of there, okay? They're kind of there. So they're not great. I know that a lot of people are predicting Ohio State blowout, but with this game being in Indiana, I think it actually could be a good one. Another one of the games I'm going to be looking at is Maryland, who just dominated Syracuse last weekend. Syracuse came in as a preseason top 25 football team. Maryland put the hammer down on them, and now they are in the top 25. Clearly, Syracuse dropped out, right? So how does Maryland handle this now? Look, Maryland's a football team over the last couple of seasons, played Texas very well. Now they've beat Syracuse. How can they handle getting some actual recognition going forward? Look, if you want to do contrast and comparison, a lot of people were talking about that game that Syracuse won over Clemson a couple of seasons ago. Mind you, that was the last football game that Syracuse won that season, and Clemson went on to play for a national title. So understand that beating a top 25 football team does not make you a great team, okay? It means that you were better that day. So was Maryland better that day against Syracuse, who may have been an overrated football team? Or are they the real deal and they're going to continue to assert their dominance? That's what I'm looking for them as they get ready to play Temple. I like this matchup, too, between Stanford and UCF. Look, there's been a lot with Stanford. Obviously, their quarterback, Davis Mills, has had to come in and assert himself in a tough situation. Stanford, I think, would be a very good football team had Costello not been hurt. And offensively, Central Florida hasn't necessarily impressed me yet. And I've been one of those people that have rooted for Central Florida. I think when they were undefeated, they deserved at least an opportunity to go and play in the playoff. If you're undefeated, to me, you get a chance to be there. Now, where they have been impressive is defensively. What I'm looking for Central Florida in this game is for them to assert themselves as not only a defensive team, but an offensive team who can put up mad, serious points without having to start on the other team's 50. Those are the things that I'm going to be looking for Central Florida. I need to know, are you truly a dominant football team? I think Michigan State, Arizona State's going to be a very good football game. Obviously, Michigan State's had their trouble with Arizona State over the last couple of seasons. Iowa State, that rivalry game, Iowa State coming off of a year where they got some recognition, started out the season top 25, struggled early. How will they handle a little bit of adversity? And I think Florida and Kentucky in the SEC is going to be another key game as well. And for me, the reason behind that is Florida really didn't impress me against Miami. And then, of course, what happens in the SEC, they end up playing some mundane, team afterwards, and that's what Florida did. To me, they need a dominant win over Kentucky, right? The quarterback situation in Florida is not the best with Phillip Franks. He still has not shown me that he is the guy who can get you to a collegiate championship. I think he's a good quarterback. He's just not good enough to quite get you there from what I've seen. And then, of course, I think the final game for me that I'm going to be looking at is Clemson and Syracuse at the Carrier Dome. And it's not because Syracuse won a couple of years ago. It's not because Syracuse should have won last year. Remember, they were up by 10 points heading into the fourth quarter, 23-13. I thought Dino Babers really dropped off the play calling. I felt he was playing to not lose instead of win. I hate sayings that are used over and over again, but in this instance, it definitely was the point, case, and scenario. Some off-play calling towards the end. 3rd and 8, instead of trying to get a first down, you're at midfield. Take a chance, try and get that first down, right? Don't run the football, okay? In this game, what I'm looking for, because, Tommy DeVito is taking it, and he was taking it from me in preseason looks. I knew right away that I didn't think Syracuse was a top 25 football team, and what was really odd to me about their game against Maryland last weekend was that Syracuse is generally a very good team defensively. Over the last 4 or 5 years, they've been a football team that has survived on their defense, the amount of turnovers that they create. Matter of fact, if I remember correctly, last year in the NCAA, they were the best at creating turnovers. So from one coach to another, that aspect of their game certainly had not changed. Offensively, they didn't play bad. It was just trying to keep up. Somebody scores 60-plus on you, that's difficult. And I've always said before, the name of the game is score. But that's always why I've always said it doesn't matter if you get 35 points a game. Because if your defense can't stop anybody, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to literally go possession for possession. You can't afford to turn the football over at all. So I'm looking for Syracuse to have a clean, neat game. They're going to have to use some very aggressive play calling against Clemson. And defensively, they're going to have to force some turnovers. They're going to have to get some stops. Look, I think that this is a different Clemson team than what they've seen over the last couple of seasons. And truth be told, if this was a team that Syracuse had with Eric Dungy, I think last weekend would have happened very differently. And going into this season, overall as a whole, I think it would have been very different. But, Eric Dungy is gone, and Syracuse has DeVito, who is decent, but again, I don't know if he's great. And I think Clemson needs to dominate Syracuse to get over that hump, right? This is a team now that is annoying you, basically. And you're getting a lot of heat for it after you play these games against Syracuse. I'm looking for Clemson to establish their dominance and assert themselves. Defensively, they played Texas A&M very well. Offensively, I still think that this football team is struggling a little bit with Trevor Lawrence, who made some throws, made some great plays. He had that scramble play. Receiver did a great job of trailing him, and he threw that touchdown pass, a dime on the money. He says he wants to use his scrambling ability more and more and more. So with Trevor Lawrence, I'm looking to see if he can find that balance and still remembering that playing quarterback is being that, a quarterback, the ability to drop back, scan the defense, and put the ball in the money. It's great to use your legs. Those are my favorite type of quarterbacks. They always have been, from John Elway to Randall Cunningham to Donovan McNabb to Steve Young. I love watching those types of quarterbacks. But they've also got to learn to find that balance. A lot of people will tell you that it took Steve Young and Elway and Cunningham and McNabb and a lot of these guys a long time to learn how to beat you with their arm, which is why McNabb went to Syracuse in the first place, right? He wanted to prove that he could throw the football, knowing if he went to Nebraska, he'd be labeled an option quarterback. So I want to see that from Trevor Lawrence. Remember who you are as a pocket passer. Step back, get the job done. Guys, I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan83. You can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan. The Full Court Press is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And, of course, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play the Full Court Press by Drew Duncan. And, as always, don't you dare touch that dial.